Welcome to the live stream. I'm Tomo. Tonight we've got a message from a viewer that we're going to talk through this evening. The message is we've sold a home which we made some good money on, 700,000 plus, really good investment. We have it sitting earning 4.75%. However, with inflation, I think we'd be earning a bit more. Are we better off investing it over the next 5 to 10 years? Do I top up my super or buy another property? Only Tomo Finance can help us. If you just put that money in a bank account, you earn a little bit of interest on it, but maybe you just beat inflation. And what we want to do on this channel, what we want to do on this journey with Tomo Finance is build wealth. So I'm going to talk through what I think are 4 key strategies tonight. Now, I do have to say, keep in mind, I'm not a licensed financial advisor. This video is for educational purposes, and I'll keep it more general in nature. So the first strategy that I want to talk about is superannuation. So for most Australians, and for especially Australians that are closer to reaching retirement, considering superannuation can be a really good strategy. And the reason for that is superannuation is a concessionally taxed environment. 15% tax on your contributions going in, 15% tax on profits at the moment, and it's a very, very good environment to grow wealth. Super is also really good because it has really steady long-term returns. So the long-run returns for Australian super funds are between 6 and 9%. Fairly low risk. Your money hopefully should be there by the time that you retire, and it grows and compounds for you while it's in that environment. So it's pretty good investment. Better than you blowing it if you're just going to waste it on stupid things. So that can be a good investment as well. A good thing to think about is your superannuation. Now there are special rules with your superannuation. There are special caps on contributing to superannuation, so you might want to make sure you don't breach those caps. And there is also special rules around if you've made a sale, about rolling some of that sale in your superannuation. So if this is one of a strategy that you're going to think about, make sure you don't breach those caps. Now, there is a proposal at the moment to change how super is taxed. That balances over 3 million will be taxed at a 30% rate. So that does perhaps change things a little bit, gives you something a little bit more to consider. But overall, superannuation is a really good environment. If you really couldn't be bothered in learning how to invest, in investing in yourself, trying to figure out what's the best thing to invest in, superannuation can be a good consideration, especially as you're getting closer to retirement. But, and this is a really big but, once your money goes into superannuation, it's locked up. It's locked in there. It's very, very hard to get your money out of your superannuation before you're reaching those retirement ages. There's really specific criteria that you have to meet. It's very, very difficult. So that's a big consideration. If you feel like you might need access to this money, if you're going through a bit of a job change, if you're going to have other bills and things that you're hoping to pay for, as in holidays, anything like that, once it goes into superannuation, it's gone, it's locked up. So that's one of the downsides of superannuation. The plus is concessionally taxed, really, really efficient, pretty stable, but it gets locked up. It gets locked up once it's in there. So that's the first strategy to consider. The second strategy we'll talk about next is investing, and investing in your own personal name, or what I'm a really, really big advocate for is setting up a separate investment vehicle, a separate wealth vehicle outside of your superannuation fund. And I'm a big advocate for that because then you can have access to the funds. If you need to go on holidays, if you want to have bills, if you want to pay for your kid's wedding, your kid's education, those sorts of things, you have that income at your disposal. Now, there are a couple of different ways you can invest. I would say for smaller sums of money, and smaller sums of money I would say are maybe in the tens of thousands of dollars, and you just couldn't be bothered with all the administration, it can be okay to invest just in your own name. If you're up in a higher tax bracket, you lose a little bit of the benefit because you're going to pay higher tax on the dividends that you receive. You're going to pay higher tax on any capital gains that you receive, but it's much, much simpler. So if you're in those sort of tens of thousands of dollars, it could be okay just to start investing in your own name. What I'm a big advocate for, so we're now talking about small sums, now we talk about bigger sums of money, perhaps in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. How to structure that are things you can do it a couple of ways. You can set up a company or you can set up a trust. And what a trust is very simply, a trust is you have some assets. It could be investment properties, it could be shares, it could be a number of things. and then you set a trust up over those assets. The assets are held by the trust, and they are held for the benefit of the beneficiaries. And why this structure can be really good, especially for larger sums of money. So say, for example, the assets in the trust will produce dividends if they're shares. If you have a spouse or partner that's perhaps not working at the time, or perhaps not working too much at the time, you can then decide which beneficiary those profits, those dividends are distributed to. So if you're someone in a top marginal tax bracket and you've got a partner that's not working very much or in a low tax bracket, you can put the shares in the trust and distribute those dividends to the spouse that's not working and pay lower tax on those profits. That's really good. Another thing that's really, really good is if you've got kids that are university age, working age children, university age, not working too much while they're studying. Maybe they're working at a coffee shop. Maybe they're doing, McDonald's jobs or something else. Not earning too much income. They're really, really good to distribute to as well as part of this trust structure. It is more expensive. It is more admin. You have to lodge a trust return. You have to do declarations. You have to do a few different things. But that's why I'd say for larger sums of money, this could be a good vehicle to set up. And then you can possibly pass on this vehicle to your children, to your family once you're gone. I'm a real big advocate for setting up a separate investment vehicle outside of your superannuation fund, because then you can access it. You've got this cash there ready to go in an emergency, if anything happens, that sort of thing. Now, one thing to keep in mind though, there are some proposals at the moment under Labor to kind of bust up this trust structure. And when I say bust it up, they're saying that they're going to tax it between 25 and 30%. Now, that might not be a deal breaker if you're in the top marginal tax bracket, but a lot of the benefit could possibly go away under these new proposed structures from Labor. So you need to really, if this is something you're considering, you really need to follow this news very, very carefully, because this will be something that's really important for your investment vehicles. So we've talked about superannuation. We've talked about investing in your own name versus investing under a trust structure. Next question is, what do you invest in? Especially if you're beginning, especially if you're learning, you may not have a clue what to invest in. That's the next question. Now, I've done a ton of videos of this on my YouTube channel. If after you finish with this live stream, head over there and check some of those. I talk through ETFs. I talk through the process of investing and how you do that. Plenty of material on my YouTube channel. But what I will say, and I'm about to put up what is my favorite graph ever. I've probably done it to death. You would have seen it. If you've seen some of my videos, it's in every single video of mine. My favorite graph. So this is the returns of the Australian share market over the last 100 years. And you can see there's lots of green, 100 positive years, and there's a few red, 24 red years. And if you couldn't quite see it, excuse me, I've increased the size of the text and said, since 1900, the Australian share market has returned an average of 13% per annum. That's the average, 13% per annum over the last 100 years. Those are pretty good odds. That's a pretty good return. Now, if you invest in the share market, you're not going to get that every year. Some years you're going to be in those red years. Some years you're going to be down. Sometimes your positive years might only be 7%. It might be a bit less. But if you have a long-term investment horizon, a long-term time horizon, and you're not trying to day trade, or you're not trying to achieve an outcome in a short period of time, the long run return is 13% per year. That's pretty good. Now, there are different vehicles you can use, you can buy to invest in the stock market as a whole, to just track the stock market. These are called ETFs. I've done a separate video on my YouTube channel around those. But if you don't want to try and pick the right stocks and day trade and put a whole bunch of effort in, you can buy stocks, you can buy shares that track markets as a whole and give you a pretty good return. 30% is pretty good. I'd be happy to get 30% per year. So I love putting this graph up because it really gives a demonstration of building wealth is more, you want to be, I guess, a little bit defensive, have some cash, have some savings, those sorts of things. But the majority of where I put my money is in things like this. So this is something to definitely think about. Once you've decided how you're going to invest, which vehicle you will use to invest next, okay, and then what you'll invest in. So that's that's a really good consideration to have there. And what I would say before I go on to my next point is investing in shares, and the benefit of investing in shares is that they are very liquid. You can sell your shares, have the cash in 2 days. So you can it's a very, very liquid investment. So if you're thinking that you might need cash in a hurry, you don't want your cash locked up in super, you don't want your cash locked up in other ways, shares are a really, really good liquid asset. Now the question comes back to then, what about property? Property was the fourth. So the first was superannuation. The second was our investment vehicles, individual versus trust. Third is what we invest in. And fourth, we're talking property. Now, what I would say about property is if you have very low personal liability, so it's very, very unlikely that you would get sued personally. So some occupations that possibly could get sued, I think, are some tradespeople. I think electricians have a very high personal liability. Lawyers, possibly doctors. So if you're one of those people that has high personal liability, that's who I'm not talking about those people. If you have low personal liability, it's very, very unlikely that you would get sued. Then what a good strategy can be is if you're going to buy a property is to hold it in the person's name that is in the highest tax bracket. So if you're in a higher tax bracket, it can be beneficial to hold the property in your name because especially in those early years, likely the cash flows will be negative and you should be able to claim some good tax deductions in those early years. So there are definitely other considerations, if you want to have properties in 2 names, if it's a partnership, or you can certainly put properties in a trust. But if it's something that you're not overly worried about and you'd have low personal liability, one good strategy can be holding an investment property in someone's name that is in the highest tax bracket. That's how you really get a really good tax benefit. Now, in terms of the returns of property versus stocks, this was a report that I was able to find. It's by CoreLogic, and it basically says it's sort of hard to get the same 100-year time span. I think in different times it's different returns. But this report sort of indicates that housing has done a little bit better than equities over the long run. I've equally seen other reports that shown share market has done a little bit better than property. But what I would say is they're about the same, roughly the same. Could be a little bit higher in some years versus the other and vice versa. It's pretty close. The one key consideration, which is what we were talking about before, is liquidity. So if you think that you're going to need access to cash, so if you buy an investment property and for whatever reason you may need cash for a bill, for a transaction, for a holiday, something like that, you would have to borrow against that property, or to try and liquidate that property would be very, very painful, would be very difficult. That's the main difference between properties and shares. Shares are much more liquid. You need a lower sum of money to get into it, and you can liquidate them very quickly if you need it. So that's the main difference between real estate and shares. Now, what's the answer? Hopefully I've given you a bit of a thought process to think through that. You could adopt all 4 of them. You could put a little bit into your super, make sure you check your caps, you're not breaching those caps. You could choose to then learn to invest yourself either through your own individual name, or you could set up a structure. And if you have enough left, you can maybe think about a deposit for a house, a deposit for investment property. You can also buy these things called REITs on the Australian Stock Exchange, real estate investment trusts. So if you like the idea of property, if you're drawn to property, but you want something a bit more liquid, you can buy shares in companies, and their whole purpose is managing investment properties. So there is that option as well. So really great question. If you have any other questions, head over to my Facebook, head over to my Instagram, shoot them through. I'm always happy to take questions and do live streams like this. Hope I gave you a bit of value. If I did, please give the video a like. Helps push my video out to the other viewers. Not seeing any questions in the chat. I'm seeing 5 people in the live stream at the moment. So thank you for joining me tonight. Shoot any questions through, or leave me a comment if you have any other questions. And thanks for stopping in. I'll see you guys next time.